Well, good morning. We're going to do about 30 minutes on quality control for microsurfacing this morning. It's really difficult to talk about microsurfacing quality control in 30 minutes. But our source document that we've used for all of these presentations and web-based trainings that we've produced over the years is a design and inspection manual, which is newly updated, available for free, especially to agencies. You can sign up on the website. But this presentation is a distillation of a presentation that we built from this document. So this is a double distilled presentation on quality control. We'll just get right into it. A lot of important things to consider when we talk about quality control, and first and foremost is the proper site selection. You've got to have good specifications and proper roadway preparation, the proper equipment, thorough and accurate mix designs, accurate equipment calibration, test strips, and evaluating those test strips, screening of all the aggregates and material consistency, proper application rates for the materials being used, choice of pay items, contractor performance, quality project inspection, public notification, and we're going to talk about each of these individually as we go through the presentation, agency industry relationship, and ultimately information. So let's just start off. Proper site selection. It is important, as you guys know, you have to have a complete and thorough evaluation of the pavement that's to be treated to determine the suitability of the treatment. For microsurfacings, roadresource.org is a source here. We like to see PCIs of 70 or above. If you go below those, you need to start considering some combination treatments. You're going to be looking at a little bit more expensive endeavor because of the preparatory work that you have to do to those pavements before they receive the treatment. And you always have to go at it with the thought of right treatment, right road, and the right timing. So it's important to remember that the best materials placed by the most experienced and capable contractors cannot overcome poor site selection. Everything can be perfect. You can have a thorough and accurate mix design. You can have great calibrations, great crews with the best equipment, but if they're putting it on a road that is not a good candidate, you're going to lose. In the South, and you may enjoy this statement, we call that putting whipped cream on horse manure. It's still horse manure at the end of the day. You don't want to use microsurfacing or any thin structural non-surface preservation treatment as a stopgap measure. Ultimately, that will result in the specifying agency getting a bad name. It will give the material a bad name, and it will give the application contractor a bad name as well. And the end result would be one less arrow in the quiver as far as preservation treatments to take care of the business at hand. So be very careful when you do that. Do your due diligence when it comes to proper site selection. That is first and foremost when it comes to good quality micro or any kind of a project for that matter. Okay, good specifications. It's not only important to have good specifications, but they have to be enforced. And I find more often than not, we work in multiple states that agencies are not familiar with these treatments, and they tend to stay in the truck and get out and not make the hard decisions that need to be made at times. So you have to familiarize yourself with those specifications. They need to be good, they need to be updated, and you got to have a good starting point, but you have to enforce them, and you need to tailor those specifications to the project itself. So I say that because broad brush specifications may not be the answer to everything. They're a great starting point, but you need to be project specific when you're putting those things together. So you can start with an AASHTO spec, an ISSA 143, state DOT specs. They're all good starting points, but there has to be some specifics in there that are directly related to the project that you're working on. And incorporate local conditions and materials and processes. Lessons learned on previous projects should be considered while compiling these good specifications. If you've been using these treatments, such as microsurfacing over the years, you've learned what works and what does not work. Put those in those specifications and you'll be better off. And these things need to be updated periodically to incorporate the best practices, material, and equipment. I've helped several states with their microsurfacing specifications, and what I found is you go in and you do it in 2017, but that book is not actually published until 2020. So sometimes it takes a while to get those new specification books out there. It really probably needs to happen faster than that, so you can incorporate all of those new best practices and equipment specifications that are out there, because things do improve on a constant basis. So, update these things periodically to make sure they're good. Another big thing, Roadway preparation, both early and final stages. You see I got both sides going here. All the underground utility repairs, concrete curb and gutter driveway repairs, patching of base failures or pavement failures, leveling up, we call it structural leveling, leveling or filling wheel ruts, crack sealing 1/4 of an inch or larger is recommended. We heard Dr. Vargas talk about the importance of crack sealing and the results that we get by doing that, and it's very cost effective, a little labor intensive, but the payoff is big. Treatment of vegetation intruding into the asphalt. I don't know if that's a huge problem here, but in the South, Bermuda grass just destroys the edges of the pavement as it grows through it. It literally will crumble that pavement to pieces if you don't keep it treated. Need to cut those shoulders back, get the water off the pavement, and another little old thing, tree trimming. These microsurfacing pavers are big, they're cumbersome, and they have to have access to the pavement. So if you're doing municipalities or county roads with canopies and things of that nature on them, make sure that you've got enough clearance so these vehicles can get in and do the work. So that's some of the early stage stuff. Final stage stuff, surface cleaning. It's extremely important that we maintain a bond with these thin treatments because that's what we rely upon for performance. If we can't bond to that pavement, we will not perform, guaranteed. Structure and casting protection, whether it be a drain inlet or a catch basin or a water valve cover, a manhole, you have to cover those, mark them, get back and open those things up after the material's cured. Prior to opening it up to traffic, you're going to be a lot better off. Tack coat, I don't know if you guys use tack coat up here. We do not. I haven't tack coated a microsurfacing project in 30 years. We do not have delamination issues in the South, so it's not a big deal. The only time you need tack coat is if you're looking at an extremely oxidized pavement or it's concrete or brick, and then you may consider doing a tack coat under those circumstances. Pavement marking removal, simply put, ISSA states that most paint markings do not require any treatment whatsoever unless it's thermoplastic. And then we talk about anything in excess of 4 inches needs to be removed prior to microsurfacing application. So what would that include? Stop bars, crosswalks, railroad crossings, words, symbols, arrows, things of that nature that generally reside in areas where you have stopping, starting, twisting, turning, torquing type traffic, and that's where you can have some early wear issues and delamination. So make sure that you remove those up to about an 80 to 85% level. You really don't need to get into that pavement structure to remove that stuff. We're just trying to ensure that bond, and by removing 80 to 85% of that thermoplastic, you're going to achieve that. So those are some of the things that you need to do prior to the application and at the last minute to help you achieve good quality and good performance. Proper equipment, and what I say here is match equipment to the project. You've got continuous machines like you see on the left, and you have truck-mounted units on the right. They are both very capable of producing the same exact mix. But you may consider using truck-mounted units on smaller projects where you have to be a little more nimble, cul-de-sacs, crossovers, ramps, things of that nature. They're very handy for that. If you're on a bigger job, long pulls, the continuous machine may be the choice that you want to have. You may get a little better continuity of mix there because you only got one mixing vessel, and you definitely generally have higher production rates. And really what's important is reduction of construction. The best way to make a construction joint, in my opinion, is to eliminate it if you can. Because once a joint, always a joint, just like a utility cut. They just will not go away. And it's not that they can't be made properly, but if you can eliminate them, that's your best bet. Thorough and accurate mix designs. Obviously, we want to follow the ISSA A143 mix design criteria, use an AASHTO accredited lab when possible, which is becoming more and more possible as the days go by. You want to make sure that the contractor submits that mix design at least 2 weeks in advance for evaluation and approval by the agency that's going to be performing the oversight on the work. And you want to make sure that you produce a mix that is consistent with the job mix formula. Mark and I were talking a little bit about it, and I'll get into more detail on that as far as how we pay for these treatments a little later in the presentation, but obviously we want to live within the ranges of that job mix formula and adjust from the optimum job mix formula only when project conditions warrant. And what may be, why might you want to run on the lower end of the residual content in a microsurfacing mix design? If you've got a rich asphalt surface, a chip seal that's kind of been flushing or hopefully not bleeding, but you may want to run on the low end of that design to allow for some of that migration of that existing free-flowing asphalt up into that microsurfacing, because it's going to come back through. And conversely, if you've got an extremely dry, aged, oxidized, somewhat a little bit of raveling going on, you may want to run on the higher end of that design. So it does give you a little wiggle room there, but you have to make sure that you only make those adjustments from the optimum when completely necessary. And you can see just an example of a job mix formula recommendation below. You know, the important one is 12.5% plus or minus 0.5%. So, you know, you can go from 12 to 13, you got to stay within that range, and you're generally going to be okay. We do not allow our superintendents or operators to make changes from this job mix formula unless they justify the reasons that they want to do so. And generally that's something that can be discussed with the agency, and those decisions can be made together. Accurate equipment calibration. If you take nothing else from this presentation, know that you have to calibrate this equipment on a regular basis to stay on top of the mix that it's producing. You know, right now we don't have the opportunity. We do have studies that are ongoing that will help us with extractions down the line to verify our residual asphalt contents, but we're not there just yet. So the application equipment has to be calibrated and set up to produce a mixture that's consistent with the JMF in the approved design. It's essential that calibration be completed using the actual project materials immediately prior to job startup. This is a change that you'll find within our design and inspection manual. We used to recommend that if a calibration was done within a 6-month period of time, it could be transferred from job to job. Now we recommend that calibrations be done prior to each job. And there's some benefits for that. From a contractor's perspective, it lets them know if there's any changes in the equipment, which is important. For the agency's perspective, it gives them a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling to know that that equipment has just been calibrated on their project, specifically for their project, and it's going to produce the material in the consistency that the JMF calls for. But to do that, we've got to have an accurate moisture test done when we calibrate. You know, there's always contention. Should the contractor do that? Should the agency do that? Well, it depends, but that needs to be clarified. But the aggregate moisture content is extremely important before you do your calibration. And of course, no application equipment should be allowed to work on a job without that calibration. And even more importantly, agencies should become engaged in the calibration process rather than observing from a distance. Now, I say that from experience. And having been in this business for 36 years, I've seen 5 or 6 state vehicles or agency vehicles in our staging area while we're doing our calibration, but they're sitting on the tailgate over there while the contractor's performing the calibration over here. So they're not engaged, and it's the perfect opportunity for them to become familiarized with how we take these component materials, mix them together in the ratios that the job mix formula calls for to produce that mix that we're looking for. It's an ideal situation for them to get in there and rub elbows with the contractor, see how the equipment's working, see how these things are coming together. I challenge you to stay involved in that process. Test strips. Immediately after calibration, how many people in here require test strips before a microsurfacing project? I saw 1 hand back there, 2 hands. Okay, test strips are good. So the reason we do them is to assure adequate workmanship, aesthetics, and cure time of the mixture is achievable when applied with the personnel, equipment, and materials intended for use during execution of the project. They should be performed in similar conditions as those expected during normal application. So if it's a daytime job, do the test strip during the day. If it's a nighttime job, do the test strip at night. There are some agencies that do that directly backwards, and there's not a lot of value in that because the emulsion that you produce to work with your aggregate for a nighttime job is different than the emulsion that you produce to work with your materials for a daytime job. There's going to be a difference in chemical loading, the braking and setting capabilities, things of that nature. Do your test strips and things of that nature in the hours that you're going to do the work. If you do hand work during a test strip, it should have uniform application rate and surface texture that sufficiently matches that applied by the spreader box. It's never going to match identically with that. So have that in mind, and with a little time and traffic, it will all match up, but handwork's going to look a little bit different. Now, how do we evaluate these test strips that are so important? Again, We've got our thorough mix design. We've calibrated to that mix design. We're producing a mix that's consistent with that. Now we need to go out and place it in a test strip, and how are we going to evaluate that test strip? Well, again, like I talked about earlier, proportion optimization. Do we need to tweak that mix that we're producing within the job mix formula to give the best performance characteristics for that project? That gives you an opportunity to do that. Application rate verification. I mean, if it's 18 pounds plus or minus 2, you want to make sure that that test strip material was placed at those application rates. Uniformity of surface texture, excluding any rut filling or leveling. You want to make sure that you get good uniformity across the full width of that mat. You want to make sure that the equipment's in good condition. And I know that's not something that a DOT typically does, but if they see a hydraulic leak, or if they see aggregate spilling out from underneath the machine onto the road, those are bond breakers day in and day out, and that needs to be brought to the contractor's attention, remedied, and then they go to work. Adequate workforce. Do they have the workforce on hand during that test strip and for the rest of that project that they're going to need to apply those materials adequately? Cure time. Cure time is a big issue. We want good return to traffic timing, and it's probably a bigger issue to the contractor than it is to the agency, so it's very important. But keep in mind that cure time is not directly related to overall long-term performance. Just because it cures fast does not mean that you're guaranteed long-term performance. It just means it's setting up quick and you're going to have good return to traffic. So workmanship's the next. Did that contractor, while applying that test strip, illustrate the workmanship that they're going to provide for you on that project? And then proper alignment's always a big deal. Are they pulling a straight line, or are they looking like a snake going down the road? You can generally tell during a test strip whether the contractor is well equipped at the task at hand. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes the test strip doesn't go right and they have to start over and do it again, but it's extremely important, and these are just some of the evaluation measures that you may consider while evaluating those test strips. So just some examples here. On the left, a test strip, and there on the right, that is actually on US 280 in Auburn, Alabama, during an NCAT microsurfacing installation. That's still out there, I think, since about 2015. 528 foot long. Test strips can be 500 foot long. They can be 1,000 feet long. They can be however long you want them to be. And in most cases, when we perform them, we'll do say a full nurse truck, which will take us about 1,000 feet or so. We will stop. Everybody will look at it. I call it the kick in the rocks deal. And they'll do that, and within about an hour, they say, yeah, everything's looking great, and we'll just proceed from there. So it's not something that you do one day and have to wait a 24-hour period of time before you proceed with the project. It's something that a quick decision can be made where the contractor can get out there and get working. Always, in my opinion, the test strip should be performed on the pavement that's going to receive the treatment itself. Doing a test strip in a parking lot that has a totally different type of surface texture and asphalt than what's out on the project doesn't yield you a lot of good information. So doing it on the project is the way to go. Screening of aggregates. I don't think it's a huge issue out here. Out west, they do have a lot of dust abatement issues, and screening of aggregates is by permit only. They don't like the dust. Not typically an issue for us in the south. We've got high humidity. Moisture contents in our screenings are generally anywhere from 3 to 5%. So dust is typically not a problem. But we want to make sure that in the stockpile that they stockpile that material correctly and make sure that it's not contaminated. So if you're doing a scrub seal job with a micro over the top of it, you want to make sure that your class 4 chips aren't getting mixed with your microsurfacing aggregate. You want some good distance in between those things, and just to make sure that you keep a good stockpile. Housekeeping's always a good issue, but ISSA or ISSA, and we do it ourselves at Vance Brothers, we screen our aggregates directly in the nurse truck and or the truck mounted unit prior to it going to the project site. And we do that so, if you screen it right back onto the ground, that just allows an opportunity for an overzealous loader man who gets too low to pick up some gravel from the underlying structure that your stockpile's on, and you've defeated the whole purpose of screening the stone. So screen it directly into your vehicles before they go to the job, and you'll save a lot of difficulties down the line. Material consistency. I always say use materials with a history of past performance. That doesn't mean we're not open to finding new sources. We check with different quarries all the time. Every year we do that. But I've also, as we did with the NCAT study, when we decided on what aggregates to use, we knew, because we had had over 25 years of experience with those stones. We knew that they were proven performers. We knew that they were consistent. We knew that they worked out well with our mixed designs. So when possible, do that. And then what's really important is the sample that's used for the mixed design process should be very representative of the material that's put on the project site. We do our mixed designs during the early winter, midwinter to early spring, okay, well before the job's going to be done. So you have to make sure with your relationship with these quarries that sample that you're sending to that friend for that mixed design is going to be consistent with the material that you're going to get on the job on day 1, on day 15, or on day 30. You have to have that consistency, and it's important, to check and stay within the tolerances set forth in that ISSA 143 mixed design criteria. If you get a little bit outside it, it's not too big of a deal, but it can be checked out in the lab really quick, and an adjustment to that mixed design can be made, resubmitted, and approved. So it's important. Proper application rates. Projects and pavement conditions vary greatly in most instances, and the application rate of the material needs to be consistent with the surface characteristics and the desired performance. That's a mouthful, but it is a consideration. Again, broad brush application rates may not be suitable. Those should be components of the plans, not the specification. You can do a lot with those broad brush specifications, but application rate is one of those things that should not be involved in that spec, in my opinion. I like for those projects to be engineered. You get out of the truck, you determine what those application rates should be, and you put them in the plan with the typical section, construction note number 1. Type 2 aggregate shall be applied at this rate. That's where that belongs. Past performance obviously needs to play a role in what those application rates should be. And the rates should be verified multiple times a day by both the contractor and the agency. With today's equipment and the monitors out there, you can get real-time information by just turning around and looking at the monitor on the machine that will give you an indication of what your current application rate is at that time, in real time. Now, there's old-fashioned ways to do that as well. Mark out 500-foot sections, take the beginning count, the end count, use your calibration factors to determine what the application rate is. It's a very quick process, but no matter how you do it, it needs to be done multiple times. Most specifications say at least 4 times a day. I can tell you, as a contractor, we're looking at it constantly with our monitors. I mean, that is a fantastic tool that came on the scene about a decade ago. It gives us that real-time information, but it's a monitor. It doesn't make adjustments for you, so it only shows you if you put bad information in that monitor, it's going to give you bad information back. So again, another reason to be very involved in that calibration process, to see what those factors are, make sure they're input into that monitor properly, and make sure that no changes have been made on that machine after that calibration has been performed. Pay items. There's several different ways to pay for this material, and as a contractor, we don't care which one it is, just as long as you're paying us. That's important. So you can pay by the unit area, square yard. Very easy method. The square yards of that pavement is never going to change. So it can be measured before the job, during the job, after the job. It's going to remain the same. And to an agency, they know when they bid a square yard job, if it's 100,000 square yards at $3 a square yard, they know exactly what their cost exposure is going to be. On bid day, it's going to be exactly what that cost exposure is at the end of the project. No changes. A lot of agencies like that. But when you do that, you have to go back to your application rates, job mix formula, and make sure that the applicators are operating within those windows set forth, and do it that way. The second way to pay for it is composite ton. So that's when they take the rock, Portland cement, or mineral filler and emulsion, work it into a ton price, and pay for it that way. Perfectly acceptable, just requires a different way of quantifying all of those 3 elements. And then probably more popular than any is the ton and gallon. Ton of aggregate and gallon of emulsion. Now that aggregate also would include the mineral filler. It's considered that. Again, they're all acceptable methods, but they do require different elements to quantify them. Some of these methods will incentivize the applicator to use the optimum binder content set forth in the job mix formula. Other methods may not. And when I say that, I was talking with Mark earlier, and I'm not going to mention the state, but there's a state in the middle part of the country that the microsurfacing business is highly competitive, and they pay by the square yard. So if you've got 5 and 6 contractors bidding on a project, very tight, very competitive, it kind of incentivizes that low bidder to say, you know, I can run 0.5% lower on my binder or my emulsion content because my number's really not that good on this job. We got it, but I'm going to try to increase my profit. And that will incentivize him to run on the lower end of that design rather than at the optimum level. That's not really a good way to approach it. So, but if you're going to pay them for every gallon of emulsion that they install and every ton of material of rock that they install, that incentivizes him to put those optimums in. So, you know, let the mix design through their performance testing tell you what those rates should be. But if you pay by ton and gallon or composite ton, a little more incentive to put a little more binder in it. Contractor performance. You know, the contractor needs to use a well-seasoned workforce that will provide acceptable workmanship. Out of all the treatments out there, it doesn't matter if it's a thin overlay, chip seal, scrub seal, crack sealing, microsurfacing is one of the more, I wouldn't say difficult, but you have to have your ducks in a row before you hit that start switch with a microsurfacing material. It's very important to do so, and to have contractors that are well versed in how to apply this material, that's the way to do it. And we do that by having dedicated forces. You know, our microsurfacing crews, that's what they do every day. They put microsurfacing down. We have chip seal crews that's all they do. And if you can dedicate those forces to those particular treatments, I think you're going to have a lot better success. So, and contractor certification may play a role in that as well. So keep that in mind. And contractors' in-house QC/QA efforts are a must. Whether that be specified or whether the contractor is self-policing himself, those are always good. You know, getting the aggregate in early, checking to make sure that the gradation is good and within the tolerances set forth in the approved mix design. Those kind of things can make a world of difference with the outcome of the project. Quality project inspection. Agency engagement and oversight is imperative to ensure success. Now, I do not show the state where this gentleman is from, but is he doing a good job of inspecting? Absolutely not. But it boils right back down to the same thing I talked about earlier. He is unfamiliar with this treatment, and his comment is, this is the first time we've ever used this product in our district. If you do us a good job, we'll do some more. So they just throw it right back on the contractor. They're not pulling their weight, in my opinion. And the only way to get that guy out of that truck is to make him familiar with these treatments. He's very familiar with concrete, very familiar with hot mix asphalt, may even be familiar with chip seal processes. But if he's not going to get out of that truck. He's not going to stop that contractor. He's not going to ask for an explanation from, you know, when things just don't look like they're going very well. So we have to have that trickle down information from the top. I mean, our designers and DOTs are doing great. The top level folks that have bought into the concept of preservation, they get it. But when it gets down to the project engineer level and actual inspector level, that's where I see that gap. That information doesn't seem to flow to those people as well as it should. Agency contractor willingness to work together always yields best results, and I'll talk about that just a little more in a minute. And again, certification may play a positive role in that project outcome for both the agency and the contractor. Got to be two-sided. Public notification. I don't know of any microsurfacing contractors that do not employ a robust notification program. An informed public it behooves us, should I say, to inform that public so they know what's going on. You know, sometimes they don't understand preservation. Well, why are you doing something to this road? It's in good shape when you're not doing something to Oak Street, which is in much worse shape over there. So it gives you, as an agency and a contractor, an opportunity to educate them and make the general public familiar with what you're doing. And again, I think they're great. You can do the early stages of that through agencies, through their websites, their email blasts, through mailers or whatever. And then when the contractor gets in, they typically a 24-hour notification through a door hanger that will include product information, instructions, date of installation, and the project manager or superintendent's contact information. If you do all of that and put on their specific instructions, if you're in a neighborhood where everybody's got well-kept yards and sprinkler systems, you better have a note on there that said, please turn off your sprinkler systems. We're going to be microsurfacing your road. Nothing worse than going in and putting thousands of dollars worth of material on a roadway and somebody's sprinkler system coming on, and next thing you know, your gutters are stained and you have all kinds of problems, and you're redoing that roadway because of that. So you can tailor these things to each situation. And the final stage of that notification is the day of application. Knock on that door, remind them, hey, you knew we were coming, we're getting ready to start. If you're planning on leaving, now may be a good time. And this robust approach of public notification is fantastic. I mean, it works great. We do it. I can't tell you the hours that we spend notifying the public, but it really, it pays off big dividends in doing so. And again, agency can help with that, and so can the contractor. And this was what I was talking about earlier, the agency-industry relationship. What yields the best results? The people that are arm wrestling day in and day out with an adversarial approach to things? No, those never work out good. When you partner, when you're on the right where the handshake is, that's what I've learned over the years provides the best project, working together to achieve the goals set forth. And I know there's not an objective statement in every project. I'd like to think that maybe one day we can get to that. But we want to make sure that we meet those goals, and we have very similar goals. So working together to get to that, to reach that goal is super important in my mind. And information. You know, you guys are here gaining information on all the treatments and the performance of these treatments and things of that nature, and I applaud you for that. But there's a lot more out there. There's probably more information out there than you can digest. But this information, you know, I challenge you to take it back home with you, send it down the ranks of your departments, make sure everybody knows. You can go to the ISSA website at slurry.org. You can go to roadresource.org, fp2.org, and obviously pavementpreservation.org. There's a ton of information out there. Become familiarized with these treatments, and your success rates are going to be a lot higher. Let's talk about these keys to success. Proper site selection, imperative. Good specifications, have to be enforced though. Proper roadway preparation early and final. Get out and mark those patches, fix those curb and gutters, put those culverts in well in advance of the contractor coming in to do that work. Make sure you specify the right equipment for the type of job that you're going to perform. Thorough and accurate mix designs. You know, this is if we're baking a cake, we want to follow that recipe, and that's what we find through that mix design and job mix formula. Accurate equipment calibration. You know, if we do all of our due diligence and pick a great site, and we've got the great specifications, and we've done all our prep work, and we've got the right equipment on the job, and a good job mix formula, but we don't calibrate it to produce that mix, we're leaving ourselves very vulnerable for failure out there. So extremely important, and like I said, we recommend doing that prior to each job. Test strips and evaluation measures, you know, directly after calibration, get out there, do it, make sure everything's working well, everybody's got their ducks in a row, and then you can hit the ground running and the project will come out better. Screening of all the aggregates directly into the truck is a huge item. I'm telling you, just, you know, a shovel full of 3/4 inch rock in a pile of screenings can create a lot of havoc out there. And it's simply, you can simply remove that prior to the material getting out to the job. You're way ahead of the game. Material consistency, try to use stuff with a history of past performance, but don't give up on new sources. Proper application rates, you know, do your due diligence, do your research, find out what type 2 application rates have a history of past performance, what type 3, and incorporate those into your plans. Pay items, pay for it as you see fit, but know that, you know, if a highly competitive situation paid by the square yard, contractors can and will run on the lower end of the design to increase that profit margin. Contractor performance, they can do it, but sometimes the playing field needs to be leveled from the agency. Again, through their familiarity with the treatment, they can level that playing field for all contractors bidding on the work and make sure things are right. That's what I'm talking about, project inspection. Public notification, again, a lot of benefits from that, and enormous, that is hard to quantify what those relationships will do, but I've seen more jobs come out on a positive side when we're all working together to reach a goal that we both have. It always works better. And then the information. We've got to have that. So just some pictures. I'm not a very good drone pilot, but I had to get some pictures of this stuff. This is what happens when everything comes together. The agency picked a good site. We've got great materials. The applicators did a wonderful job, and these are the type of results that you should expect. Anybody have any problem with that in their communities? I don't think so. But it takes a lot to get to that point. And both contractor and agency and material supplier are all part of the plan. So, and then one of my favorite statements to my guys is, good is the enemy of great. We've always heard, good enough for government work. Well, we don't like that. We want that to be great. We want them to be very happy when we leave. And this is a microsurfacing over an HIR job in Northeast Arkansas that just went extremely well. Department's very happy with it. But again, not only did the HIR contractor, but the microsurfacing contractor and the state work together to achieve those results. And that's what you can do. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned in your tables about an optimum of 12.5% emulsion in one of your tables as like an optimum number to use. So for states like New Hampshire, where microsurfacing hasn't worked all that well, would you recommend playing around with those numbers, maybe going to like 14% emulsion if you don't have enough of a polymer content, or maybe say using like a higher polymer content, because we've had like a lot of delamination issues in the past, at least that's what I've heard from my colleagues. And especially, I think one of the issues we probably have had is a compatibility maybe with the aggregate and the emulsion, because the source of your aggregates matter a lot. The type of the emulsifier you use, the type of the emulsion you use matters a lot. So would you recommend that state agencies do more tests of compatibility between the type of the emulsion and the type of the aggregate they use, just to have like more success?
Well, there's several questions in there. And first of all, I'm not a fan of an agency dictating what the job mix formula should be. They can have a range of residual asphalt contents. I think ISSA recommends somewhere between 6 and 9. I do know some agencies that have bumped that up to 7 to 10. But ultimately, I like to rely upon the performance testing and the mix design to dictate to me what that content should be. Simply put, they're putting it through rigorous performance testing in the laboratory, and who am I to grab a number out of the air to determine what that content should be? Compatibility testing is part of that mix design process. If there are issues with those materials not jiving together, that should become very apparent during that mix design process, and you can eliminate that. Now, again, I don't know what concerns or what non-performance type projects you had, but I guarantee if you'll stick to that checklist and go down it, your results should improve.
And would you recommend using the cohesion test, the ISSA TB 139 more? Because I think that's a recommended test, but a lot of agencies don't require it. Especially like, so I moved here from Iowa, and I think Iowa says they recommend ISSA TB 139, but they don't require it. And that to me could be a crucial test, because that's your set time and time to traffic, and that can tell you a lot of whether you've got the right emulsion content without going to the wet track test.
It is associated with cure, and what it does is it establishes whether that material can be considered quick set or slow set. That's what you're looking for on those cohesion tests. So yes, and it can be an indication of return to traffic time. But return to traffic, when you consider it, it's again very specific to the area you're in. What type of traffic are you going to return to that? Is it straight rolling traffic, or is it stopping, starting, twisting, turning type traffic. Rolling traffic, I can put on it really quick. I can put cross traffic on it in 5 to 10 minutes, to get people out of neighborhoods or shopping centers or things of that nature. And I can sand those intersections if I want them to get out a little quicker to keep them from destroying the material and getting the material on their vehicle. There's a lot of things we can do to that, but opening to traffic is really, in my mind, a contractor responsibility, because ultimately opening to traffic does not constitute acceptance of the work. So they need to be intimately involved in making those decisions. And if it takes an hour and 10 minutes to cure, that has nothing to do with long-term performance, as opposed if it cured in 55 minutes enough to support that traffic. But again, keep in mind, like I said, it's important to contractors that material break, set, and be ready for traffic as early as possible. And if it's a little slower than we want it, we're working with our emulsion manufacturers to tweak the chemical loading in that material so we can get those desired setting and return to traffic properties that we're looking for. Well, fantastic. Thank you for your time.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.